President. I am very pleased once again to join my friend, the senator from Vermont, on the floor to press this body to take seriously its constitutional responsibility and its responsibility to assure that the United States doesn't enter into hostilities abroad other than those situations that are vitally necessary to protect our national security interests. And I am so proud to have worked with Senator Sanders and Senator Lee and many others here to build a truly bipartisan coalition that is going to do something that, as Senator Sanders said, is historic. I have been coming down to the Senate floor for 4 years now, raising concerns about the U.S. participation in this civil war. Very few people could probably locate Yemen on the map when the United States first entered in to an agreement with the Saudis to help them in their bombing campaign. Today, it is the subject of national conversation. And with the passage in the Senate and in the House, regardless of what the president chooses to do, the world now knows that the United States is paying attention to the world's worst humanitarian disaster, a nightmare inside Yemen that is taking the lives of tens of thousands of people. Sometimes humanitarian disasters, sometimes famines are caused by natural events, those that we cannot control, droughts, for instance. This is a man-made humanitarian catastrophe, that the United States has something to say about, and we are going to say something about it in a matter of hours. Let me just say a few things about what will happen if we pass this resolution and it becomes law, and what will not happen if we pass this resolution and it becomes law. I think Senator Sanders covered this, and we have covered this enough. The first thing that happens is that we uphold the Constitution. I get it. Declaring war is a lot tougher today than it was 40 years ago or 100 years ago. It's not as if there are big armies that march at each other across open fields. Very rarely is there a nice, neat peace treaty signed to wrap up hostilities. Now we have shadowy, more diffuse enemies that are harder to define. We have wars that seem to never end. But that doesn't obviate Congress's responsibility to set parameters around war. Just because it's harder to declare war today doesn't mean that we don't still have the responsibility to do it. Over and over again, we have outsourced the decision about hostilities to the president, whether it be President Obama or President Trump, in large part because we just don't want to be in this business any longer. There is no doubt when we are helping Saudi Arabia drop bombs on churches, on weddings, on cholera treatment facilities, and on some legitimate military targets that we are engaged in war, and we should declare it here. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens if we pass this resolution and it becomes law is that we wash our hands of the blood associated with being a participant in the creation of one of the world's worst humanitarian catastrophes. Never has the world seen a cholera epidemic as big as this one, at least in recorded history. And it's no secret as to why there is a cholera epidemic, because the Saudis bombed the water treatment facilities so that the water isn't clean any longer. Now, whether or not the United States knew about this or signed off on it, we don't know, but the fact of the matter is we should not be associated with a bombing campaign that the UN tells us is likely a gross violation of human rights. Third, if we pass this resolution, it becomes law, peace becomes more likely. More likely. We have evidence of why that is, because when we passed this resolution in the Senate at the end of last year, not coincidentally, within days, a ceasefire, a partial ceasefire, was announced in Hudaydah. Why is that? Why is that? The reason is twofold. One, when the Saudis realize they don't have a blank check from the United States any longer, they get more serious about peace. But two, the Houthis, who are the other party to this conflict, who don't believe that the United States is an honest broker or that anyone will actually be serious about enforcing concessions that they give, come to the table because they see that the United States and others that we support as part of the negotiations will actually be honest brokers, that we are only willing to go so far with our Saudi partners. The fourth thing that happens is, as Senator Sanders has mentioned, we are able to send a message to Saudi Arabia, and specifically to the Crown Prince, that they need to change their behavior if they want to maintain this relationship. Some people are going to vote against this because they say it has nothing to do with Jamal Khashoggi. It does. Jamal Khashoggi's name isn't in here. The name isn't in here of the other American residents that are currently being detained by Saudi Arabia. But make no mistake, Mohammed bin Salman, who has ordered this campaign of political repression, his #1 foreign policy priority is the perpetuation of the war inside Yemen. And given the violation of trust that has occurred with the United States over the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and the cover-up of it, it stands to reason that we would rethink our association with other priorities of the Crown Prince if he lied to us blatantly about his participation in the human rights violation that has become the obsession of this country and the world. The two are connected. This will be seen as a message to the Saudis that they need to clean up their act. What will not happen? Casualties will not get worse. The Trump administration says, well, if we're not part of the coalition, it just means that we can't stop civilians from being killed. Well, forgive me, but it doesn't seem like we've been doing too good of a job thus far if 85,000 children under the age of 5 have died of starvation and disease, and tens of thousands of civilians have been caught in the crossfire. We can't get into classified information here, but let's just say that there is a limit to what the United States can do as part of this coalition. And there is no evidence to suggest that casualties will get worse. In fact, the cover being lifted of U.S. endorsements of this bombing campaign will make it harder for the Saudis to take chances because they know that they don't have the U.S. to fall back on. Second, the Saudis won't go somewhere else. This idea that if we just say we're not going to participate in this one single war with you, that the Saudis will all of a sudden break relationships with the United States and go buy their military equipment from Russia is belied by how this alliance has worked for years and the complication of the Saudis turning around and choosing to go to another partner. And if that's how this works, that the nature of our relationship is one in which the United States can never, ever refuse a request from the Saudis to participate in one of their military endeavors overseas, then that's not an alliance. An alliance allows you to tell your partner when you think that they're wrong and choose, unless you have a treaty obligation of some sort, as to whether you engage with them. And lastly, as I mentioned, some people say we will lose our political leverage, that we will make it harder for negotiations to happen. Exactly the opposite, as evidenced by the fact that when we were debating this resolution last time, as people were telling us that if we passed it, we wouldn't have as much leverage in the negotiations, successful negotiations were being concluded in Stockholm. This is a historic moment for the Congress to step up and say that enough is enough. We are made weaker in the eyes of the world when we willingly participate in war crimes, when we allow for our partner to engage in activity that leads to the slaughter of innocent. Never mind the conduct of a war in which our true enemies, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, are getting stronger and stronger by the day. I hope that we have the same bipartisan stamp of approval on this resolution today as we did last year, and I hope that it stands as a new day for this Senate when we are more willing on a bipartisan basis to do our concurrent responsibility along with the executive branch to set the foreign policy of this nation. I yield back.